Hey, this is Kirk from Go Make Music, and today I want to talk to you about mastering. Now, I have to say from the very start that there are entire textbooks written about mastering music. And what is mastering? In my opinion, mastering is the process of taking a finished mix like this, running it through a series of audio processes in order to turn it into something that hits the listener in the best way possible according to the artist's desire. And that's it. The secondary role of mastering in a situation where you have an album is to make every single song feel like part of a cohesive project, especially if you're in a situation where something has been mixed by multiple people or produced by multiple people. You might have 10 mixers and 4 producers on one album. So these things could be all over the place in terms of tone and level and loudness and dynamic range. So the mastering engineer is in charge of taking all those songs and putting them on a record in such a way that it feels like a cohesive project. That's it. That's mastering. Now, again, it is an art and it is a science, and the people that do this day in, day out are great at it. But here's what I want to say. Should everybody master their own tracks? Probably not. Is a mastering engineer a great asset? Absolutely. Should you understand the process and possibilities of mastering and experiment with it? Yes, you absolutely should. And here's why. If you experiment with mastering mixes, you now start to understand the possibilities, and that will make you a better mixer. That will make you a better producer. That will help you manage your expectations going into a record. It will help you manage your expectations of the artist that you're working with going into a record. And so I think everybody who is in music production should at least experiment or have some fun with mastering mixes with the tools you already have. Now, if you want to pursue this as your career and you want to become a mastering engineer, I would say just start grabbing some mixes and mastering them. You don't have to put them out. You don't have to release them. You can just go back and forth and listen and see how you're doing and develop your skills, do some more research, learn more. And with the tools you already have, you can begin the process. Now down the road, you might want to get better tools or better plugins or get some outboard gear and go that route. But I'm saying with what you already have, you can begin to go through the process and explore the possibilities of what mastering is. And here are the big 3 tools that you already have that you can use to begin mastering your tracks. They are EQ, compression, and limiting. That's basically it. People might say, well, what about saturation and wideners and clipping and all that kind of stuff? Well, the saturation, the clipping, and all that world, I kind of lump that in the limiting and the compression, and kind of in EQ, because when you do those things, it adds harmonic distortion, which then changes the tone. It can roll off high end. It can make things brighter, make things crunchier in the mids. It's like an EQ. But at the end of the day, I want you to think about EQ, compression, and limiting. Well, what about multiband EQ? Sure, multiband EQ, that falls into the EQ and compression category. So what about mid-side EQ? Well, that's EQ, okay? So think about just those big 3. You already have those in your DAW, and so you can experiment with what you have and then go from there. But what I want you to understand is that your 2 biggest assets that you will have in mastering, in mixing, and music production is this: your ears and your emotions. Those, at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, at the end of the day, those are the 2 assets you need to develop the most to really take what you want to do to the next level. Develop your ears and develop your emotions. What I mean by emotions is your connection to the way the music is making you feel, because that's what people resonate with. They don't resonate with all these numbers and all the stuff that I'm going to talk about. They resonate with how the music makes them feel. So you got to develop that taste for yourself. And it is a taste. So there you go. There's my mastering disclaimer. Get that out of the way. I am going to talk about numbers. I am going to talk about quote unquote standards and dynamic ranges. But again, these are just guidelines to help you develop your ear, develop your taste. A lot of this stuff I would say just do it with your eyes closed, because that's what matters, is how does it sound? How does it feel? That being said, let's talk about metering. Let's talk about levels. So what I have pulled up here is a peak and RMS level on my level meter, and I have a LUFS meter, which is a loudness unit. Let's talk about what these are, what they're listening for, and how you can use them to develop your ears when you're mastering. So let's play the mix first, see what we got going on. So my RMS is negative 12.2, and I'm actually peaking on my peak meter in my mix, okay? Let's go to the master. All right, now I'm not peaking, but my RMS is negative 7.7. What were our LUFS? Let's go over and look at our LUFS. Here's the mix. All right. So right now I'm hitting about negative 12. Let's go with master. I'm at like negative 7. So I've gotten significantly louder. So here's what I want you to think about. I don't want you to obsess over numbers, but I want you to see what it is you should actually be paying attention to. Because here we have this mix and it's peaking. My mix was peaking, but my master wasn't peaking. So does that mean my master is quieter than my mix? Well, of course not. You can just listen and know that this master is louder than this mix. So what do I need to pay attention to when I'm talking about loudness? I need to pay attention to my RMS, and I need to pay attention to my LUFS. We're going to talk a little bit more about LUFS in a second, but I want to stay on peak and RMS. So the RMS is really what you want to pay attention to see if you are quote unquote slamming your mix, or if you're trying to maintain an open and dynamic mix. Okay, so here's a couple of ranges just to give you some ballparks of what to look for. So if you want a dynamic, open sounding mix, you want to shoot for an RMS range of negative 12 to negative 9. Now, my mix, my unmastered mix, is close to that. So in a sense, I could just say my mix is kind of where I want it to be in terms of level. So maybe I don't need to limit it really that much. I could limit it half a dB just to tame those peaks. And then the other stuff that I do could just be some EQ moves, and I could leave it alone. But let's say the artist wants something that's a little bit more aggressive and a little bit louder. If that's what they want, I can talk to them about it, but at the end of the day, I am working for them. So if you want to make something that's a loud version, you want to shoot for an RMS that is between negative 9 and negative 5. That's going to be a very loud mix, master. Now, if you want to go crazy loud, which they do in the EDM and pop world, you can shoot for an RMS that is negative 5 to negative 3. Now, I'm telling you, if you try to do that, if you try to make a mix that you've done to negative 5 and negative 3, it is going to be a challenge without it sounding completely distorted and pumpy. But it's not impossible. And the people who do that, they're artists, they're scientists. They figured out how to make things really loud without sounding distorted and without sounding pumpy and nasty. So I'm not here to tell you that they are wrong or that whatever. Like I'm just telling you the possibilities. It is possible to create an extremely loud and not distorted mix. Is it something you want to do? That's for you to decide. The benefit of having a wider RMS, like -12, as opposed to, so you have -12 to 0 dB of headroom, where they have -4 to 0 dB of headroom. The benefit of having that is having a dynamic and open mix that has really quiet parts and really loud parts. That might be what you want to do. So there's RMS and peak. I do want to say peak has a little cousin that's called true peak. Okay, now true peak takes into account what is going to happen to the music after it's converted from digital to analog, which is going to happen because it has to go through speakers, so it has to be converted from ones and zeros to electricity. So true peak is something you want to pay attention to. Now, if you want to not have your stuff ever peak and ever overload, the recommendation is that you shoot for -0.5 true peak. So you want your true peak meter to read -0.5, and that should take care of any overages that might happen when it's converted, and it won't clip. Okay, but let me tell you. So you can look at these three mixes. Okay, the true peak. Let's listen to the true peak for these two. We'll start here. Okay, true peak for that one, I'm already over a dB. All right, even though it's not loud yet. So my true peak for this one is 0.2. Okay, so I could have backed off my output on my limiter a little bit more so that that wouldn't happen. Do I want to do that? Do I have to do that? No. This is an EDM pop song, millions and millions and millions of streams or whatever, and it doesn't sound terrible, honestly. And its true peak is 2.1 at times. It's literally going over 2 decibels. It's like, okay, these are ranges, these are rules, these are ideas, but you have to test this stuff out and develop your taste and what you want to do and your philosophy and kind of how you want to approach this whole deal. So there you go. True peak, RMS. I would pay more attention to RMS, pay less attention to peaks. And that will start to help you feel like, okay, I'm good. I've made the mix in the range where I want it to be. I don't need to fuss with all this stuff. Okay. Or you can say, man, I wonder if I can just make it a little bit louder. Can you do it? And just have fun with it. Okay. So there's true peak, there's RMS. Then let's talk about LUFS. Okay. LUFS is basically a new and improved, well, I don't know if it's improved, but it's a new version of RMS. So it's taking into account how humans hear and creating a unit to measure loudness. Okay, so what I like to say is, in terms of peak and RMS, or even true peak and RMS, is that peak meters are like machine ears. They're what the machine hears, whereas RMS meters are like what humans hear. They're the human ears. And mostly we are concerned with how humans hear our music. So that's the stuff we need to pay attention to if we're going to pay attention to meters at all. Now, a LUFS is basically a new version of that loudness unit. And the LUFS number that you kind of want to look at is an integrated number. So it's LUFS integrated. That just means if I turn this on and I play the song from top to bottom, when I get to the end, I let it play all the way through. When I get to the end, the number that is right there, that is your LUFS integrated number, okay? And so the standard LUF at this point in time is -14 LUFS. That could change one day. It's going to change for different platforms, but you can just Google, LUFS standards for media or music or film, or, Netflix has its like -23 dB for music. It's like, okay, so you can check all that stuff out just to see that you're in the right ballpark. But again, I say, this mix, the LUFS on this mix was -7.4, so twice as loud. The LUFS on this mix, before it was even mastered, was 15. The LUFS on this master was 9.8. And the LUFS on this, again, was 7.4. So LUFS are all over the place, and they will not kick you off of the internet for having really loud stuff, obviously. But what you need to understand is the consequences of loudness in the future, what could be happening. And I think the loudness wars are going to subside to a degree over the next decade or so. Because what happens is Spotify and other places are saying, we want our mixes to be at -14 LUFS. So if my mix is already hitting around 15, it's going to get turned down 1 dB by Spotify. So it's going to, let's do this, and I'm just going to turn this down 1 dB. Okay. But this song, since it was hitting at 7.4 LUFS, this song is going to get turned down, like basically another 7 dB. So I'll turn this down 7 dB. So if these songs play side by side in the rotation of this playlist, this is what it's going to look like. So this song will come on, that's hitting at 14, 15, whatever. And then this song will come on, that's hitting at 14, now that it's been turned down by the algorithm. So in a way, the louder you make it, you start to make it sound smaller relative to mixes that are more dynamic and punchy. And there's kind of the tension between some of the tone and aggression and impact that you get with super loud mixes versus some of the dynamic and the kind of openness that you get with these types of mixes. And you just have to choose your own adventure. You have to experiment with this stuff, pull mixes in. And so there you go. I hope that shows you a little bit of the process, a little bit of the consequences, some of the possibilities. I'm going to have other videos where I go into detail about compression, where I go into detail about limiting, and I go into detail about EQ. I'm also going to post a video where I just master this song top to bottom, and I'll try to do it in like 5 or 10 minutes, just to take you through the process. You can link to those in the description below. And also, I have a mastering checklist where I run down some of these numbers and some of these concepts that you can print out and put it on your desk. So when you start experimenting with mastering, you can kind of reference it and see what's going on. So check that out too. It's the music mastering checklist. You can go to www.gomakemusic.org, and there's some more free resources and tips and tricks for music production and music making. Like and subscribe if you found this helpful. Let me know if you want to see other videos about mixing, mastering, and music production. Have fun, try this stuff out, experiment, and until next time, go make music.